You have the airport budget, and that's on page 80 of your binders. And as with the rest, I'll give you a quick overview and then turn it over to the department head if he has anything to add, and then we'll get your questions. So this airport budget, the net cost increase is $84,000 from the previous, $162,000 is the proposed budget, $84,000 increase, keeping in mind that obviously this is one of those budgets that we have a lot of revenue coming into. Under the revenue side, you see an increase of almost $220,000. That really is underneath line 19, which is the airport fuel revenue. See a significant increase there of $158,000. And under miscellaneous revenues, which includes landing fees and other items, see a $23,000 increase there. So that's essentially where most of that is. We do see an increase also in the solar rental income as things come online. Under the labor cost, line 30, there's a $70,000 increase. This is to get the wages up to the 75th percentile, as we have done in all the other department budgets with non-union employees. And this also includes an additional full-time employee for an administrative assistant position at the airport to support the director. We asked for this last year as well, and it was one of those items that was cut out. We feel that the position is vital up there if we want to continue expanding the airport and increasing the revenue there. To have somebody there 40 hours a week to be able to answer the phone, it's the same person to answer questions, direct people to the appropriate person, whether it's Randy or if it's somebody else. Work on marketing materials, things like that. There also would be an increase then under the health insurance and the other benefits as well that go along with that. Down under the operating cost line 58, the aviation fuel. So this goes hand in hand with the revenue increase. So if we sell more fuel, we have to buy it in order to sell it. So we have an increase there too. In the expense side. So I think that's really the highlights that I have for the airport. I'll turn it over to Randy if he has anything that he wants to add.
I guess I'll start with questions as to where you guys are at right now.
Sure. Who else you got working down there at the airport?
So I have one.
There's Randy and Ben blank, but I'm like, you know what? I'm drawing a blank too. Like, who else you got working down there? Like, it's a pretty cool operation you got going on down there. Like, what's the crew look like?
It really is. It's a very small but very efficient and effective crew. I have one full-time person in addition to myself who operates primarily in maintenance. And then we have part-time folks. Right now, I actually have a couple of guys. They're all working about 16 hours a week. I schedule them 24. They rearrange things. So we have 3 part-time guys and 2 per diem people that fill in as needed to help.
Yeah, that's awesome. Making it happen.
Yeah. I'll add that having the additional person in the office will be a huge asset to helping me market the airport and keep things organized, keep me on track. With the increase in traffic, the increase in our sales, the increase in our ability to maintain the facility and keep it where it should be, it takes us out of the office, and there are many, many days where if you were to walk in or call, we're not at the phone and we're not in the office. So the building's, aside from customers or the private businesses, unoccupied by us. So,
What, in your opinion, like, what do you think, what do we need to do at the Waterville airport to make it like a Owl's Head, Rockland? You know what I mean? I think probably, you know, they got some commercial stuff coming in and out of there. We take a flight to Boston or wherever you want to go. You know, we don't have that. We just, people touch and goes, fill up, FedEx, like Colby.
well, every airport has its own little niche, if you will.
Skydiving.
Rockland being the coast and whatnot.
Yeah.
I envision long term, I'd love to see commercial traffic again. I'd love to see our business traffic continue to increase. That seems to be where we have excelled with the businesses in the region. And that's really fueled the success so far. So every incremental step that we've taken is to achieve that vision of what you described, whether it's putting the ARF truck in service, whether it's replacing fencing, whether it's making sure that the type of lights we put on the side of the runway, it's all of these different little components. So it adds up. We're getting closer and closer, and we have over the last 12 years that I've been there. Mm-hmm. Today actually is my 12-year anniversary. So
Happy work anniversary.
thank you. So it's been a lot of transition, and I see a lot of possibilities and potential. Yeah, I can't hear you.
Excuse me. The solar leases, are both of the solar projects operational now?
One of them is. The other one, I believe, will be in the next week or so. It's just waiting for, I believe, the interconnection. Should be by the end of the month.
Right. So in the budget, you're anticipating the full lease amount for each project?
We are.
Okay. Would you explain, let's see, line 18 and 20 and 17. You've got some kinds of leases and hangars, and just need some clarification of how things operate out there at the airport.
Sure. Yep, the land lease, the rental income, and the hangar leases.
Yes.
What is that?
So basically, it's how we account for the different types of leases that we're doing, whether it's a lease within the terminal building or the north hangar, or if it's a lease of property for the hangars. And then we have the solar lease as well, separate. So for example, as part of the rental income, so yes, so it would be our North Hangar lease, Airlink Aviation, which is the flight school, Vacation Land, which is the jumping school, and then we also have Maine Eye Doctors, which occupies an office. All together, with that, it's a little over 26,000. But how it's accounted for in the budget depends on how finance wants to receive the payment.
I see. And you came to council looking for more hangar leases. So that's the city owns the pad, and then somebody builds their hangar on top of that. Mm-hmm. So we just lease like a mobile home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we maintain ownership of the property. We can't sell that.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Pack, any questions? All right, nope.
Okay.
And they delivered that new fire truck yet?
Well, we have it, and it's almost finished.
All right, that's,
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, Randy.
thank you, Randy.
Next up is Human Resources on page 25.
Now she done it.
Page,
This is the department we're just saying no to, right?
page 25. It's under the general government
First
section. Okay, so this budget is up about $40,000, or about 5.7%, and really it's all in the labor costs for the most part. There's some small changes down underneath operating that I'll highlight. But we are also recommending that a full-time executive assistant be added to this department. As you probably know, it's a one-person department now that handles basically 175 full-time, part-time, seasonal employee positions and everything that goes along with them, as well as hiring, performance reviews, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, everything that goes with HR. This is also a position that we had asked for last year and recommended last year that was cut out of the budget. So we're bringing it back, excuse me, again. I think it's vital. I think there's being in my role as assistant manager, HR is one of those departments that I was overseeing directly. And I can't say enough about how much work is being done with one individual in that department, but there's so much more that we can do. From employee training, from tracking employee training, from safety training, tons and tons of things that can happen. And I've talked a little bit with Bobby Joe about those. So you do see an increase in the salary line, full-time salaries and wages that covers the cost of that executive assistant. That's line 22. That also increases the wages up to the 75th percentile as well, as we've done in all the other departments. The next line down, the salary adjustments line 23, this was instituted in there last year for the 60th percentile. So obviously we're not, I've put all of the 75th percentile in each budget instead of having it in one line. So we don't need that budgeted in there for this year. With a full-time position, the group health insurance line 28, obviously goes up because of the health insurance for that individual. Line 37, workers' compensation, you see a $15,000 increase for that insurance. That's just simply because of an increase in payroll. We have more payroll. We have to have more coverage for that. Some little differences under the operating costs. Line 49, training and conferences, shows a $3,000 increase. This is because of new employee training for that new individual. And also I hope that our HR director will be able to go to some trainings, more trainings as well, since she'll have somebody there when she's not, which would be a nice thing. We also have under the safety, so the safety committee employee recognition are also under the HR budget. The last two lines in this budget, 53 and 54. The safety committee, that line is showing a $5,500 increase. That covers purchasing an AED for City Hall, which we don't have any in City Hall at this point, which I think is kind of important to have. And this also would allow us to have a more active safety program as well. The committee is really excellent. They bring up a lot of good ideas, but we can't do them because we don't have the funding to do them.
For the folks watching at home, if there are any, would you explain what an AED is?
Sorry. And I don't know if I remember what the term is. Artificial emergency defibrillator. Yes. Yes. Yeah, Jay should know, right? I don't know what the full term is. It's a defibrillator.
Oh, wow.
have one of the big ones. Like, I've got the super duper one that's right in my chest.
Right. So this device would be, and they're automatic, obviously. So somebody has a heart attack or whatever inside City Hall. These are, I hate to say dummy proof, but they are dummy proof. I mean, you open it up, you follow the instructions, and you push the button, and hopefully it revives the individual that's having an issue until the ambulance can get there.
It's a automated external defibrillator.
External, thank you. That's what I couldn't remember.
And then,
Thanks for getting it after I decided to leave. I see where your priorities were.
Thanks,
And
Brian.
we thought you come with your own. I mean,
Right. Yeah, we can't take Jay's out of his chest for him. And then under employee recognition, the department request was $1,000 more. I added $2,000 more to that because I think it's important to provide employee recognition throughout the year and do it at a higher level than what we've been doing. More, just more throughout the year. And it costs a little bit of money, but I think it's well worth it to do that, to retain employees. Those are the highlights that I have. Bobby Joe, if you've got anything that you wanted to highlight.
I don't. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I just have a comment. I think the Human Resources Department is the most efficient department in the entire city. The fact that you run everybody's benefits and hours and do all of the collective bargaining is incredible. I'm really glad that you're the person making this department operate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did Councilor Klepak have a question? No, I thought I saw her.
No, I did not, no.
Okay.
I amplify what Claude said. Yeah, Bobby Joe is incredible. The city is immensely lucky to have a person as talented as her. The one thing I guess I would say on this point, I support the staffing request that you have in this budget. One of the things that I think should happen is we should try to capture some of that expertise that Bobby Joe has, some of the procedure and protocol that she goes through, document that so that we can have a sort of a continuity of that institutional understanding of what happens. I don't want that process to be burdensome, and it's certainly not something that I think Bobby Joe would have the bandwidth for, given everything she has. But hopefully, if we're able to give her a little bit of support, that we can undertake that process, because I think it's important.
Yeah, that's absolutely important. That's something that Bobby Joe and I have talked about as part of getting another person in that department. Other questions?
And the other thing, are you is Human Resources going to move into a real offices?
Yes, so the plan is that HR will be moving from Public Works, where they are currently, into City Hall, for a couple of reasons. Number one, if we fund an executive assistant position, there is no space at Public Works. But for the other reason is that we really need to have her in City Hall. There's constant communication between the administration department and HR, and it's much, much easier if that individual or department is located in City Hall. So we've started that process.
Excellent.
If the administrative assistant is something that doesn't happen again, because obviously you're doing a lot and there's a lot of work. I just want to make sure that you're not going to be, crushed under the weight of all the responsibility. So you're thinking that an administrative assistant would that be vital to the Human Resources Department for you not to get too overwhelmed, I guess.
This position is definitely vital for my department. Okay. Although I'm doing what needs to get done, there's so much more that needs to get done citywide. Mm-hmm. Just being able to support the departments in their personnel issues takes a lot of time. Recruitment takes a lot, collective bargaining. So being able to have somebody that's in the office while I'm out mm-hmm. with departments and doing those meetings and being able to just have that support when I'm not there so mm-hmm. employees can go to somebody else, it's absolutely critical that I get that support in that office for right. all the employees, not just myself, but for all the employees.
Well, with the council, singing your praises, I mean, obviously, I think it's important that we get you the tools that you need to effectively and successfully do your job without feeling overwhelmed or overworked.
Well, and when I first came to the city last year as the assistant and was assigned HR as one of the departments to oversee, I quickly realized the amount of work that's being done there with one individual. And as Bobby Joe has said, there's so much more that could be done. from that department. But one of the things that, that you notice right away is that when she goes on vacation, there's nobody else to do her job. And that's a problem for the city, because if we have an issue, I ineptly filled in for her when she was away, because we don't want to bother somebody when they're on vacation. They're away, they need to take their time. But if we have an issue, if we have, anything that comes up, having another individual in that department to help address that issue, with administration's help, certainly, but it's vital to have that. So, I of all the positions, well, all of the positions that I've recommended in this budget, I feel strongly about all of them. But this one is probably at the top of the list.
Right, and I think it's important because obviously, trying to avoid burnout here. So
Well, and the biggest issue one of the biggest liability issues we'll ever have is in HR.
right,
And her department touches every other department, very much like another department we'll talk about in a little while tonight.
Well, I mean, I guess that begs the question then. So we're calling this and maybe it's just, the ingrained knowledge or vision of the word administrative assistant, you know what I mean? Which I think is, I mean, I guess has evolved from
Well, we're using executive assistant for a couple of reasons. That's as the title.
executive assistant.
Executive
Sorry, okay, I
assistant.
apologize. Okay, so thank you. Now
Yes.
that clears up a lot of this. Thank
Okay.
you, my head. Thank you.
All right.
We're good.
Yeah, definitely a different level.
Absolutely, yeah. I was because I'm when you said that, I'm like, so this person's going to handle HR things, and I'm like, all right, hold on a second. All right,
Yep.
perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's as opposed to being a deputy director, isn't it?
It's close to it.
We're getting close to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Bobby
you.
Joe.
Thanks,
thank
Bobby Joe.
you.
Up next is engineering on page 37. That's with planning and community development, that section.
Who's doing that?
That would be me.
Can we go to Joel? Is he just hanging out here for
He's
many reasons?
next. Engineering shouldn't take a long time.
Sorry, buddy.
He likes to hang out. He's got nothing better to do, right? So engineering
Well, let me
shows,
just start off with a question.
Sure.
We're done with the build grant. Do we need an engineering department?
yes, we certainly do.
Okay.
We certainly do. You'll notice almost a $100,000 decrease in this budget, though,
Yeah.
for this next year. And that basically, this budget comes down to the operating costs, the last two lines. So we had contingency for the build project at $150,000 for this year. We obviously are not going to need that after this year. But we are budgeting for the Taconic Bridge decorative lights that the council had approved previously, in agreement with Winslow as well. They're sharing half the cost, and we have half the cost. It's 44,000. Yeah, it's down from what it was. It was, I think, 56 or something like that. So, and that agreement has been submitted.
And what did we end up spending out of the contingency?
For the 150 right now?
Yeah.
I can't give you a number right now, but I'm going to say by the end of the year, we're probably going to ask the council to transfer some of that to other departments, because we're not spending all of that by any stretch. We might not even spend any of that on the build project. So we're still waiting for that project to be formally finalized, including the railroad crossing on Temple, near Temple, head of Falls. That's going to be coming out of the build project too, in the contingency perhaps.
How about the potholes in the new roads?
Those are taken care of by the contractor.
Okay.
And speaking of the light, is it going to be turned on soon?
As soon as that crossing the construction is done by the railroad, then that light will be turned on. It's all ready to go. It's just a matter of they've got to get their signals in coordination and in sync with that. So it's all on the railroad.
Oh, so it might be 10 or 15 years?
Last I heard, it was in their planning and should have been done. So
Okay, good.
we certainly will check on it, though.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions or comments for engineering? And I do want to say also that, so engineering will be moving from City Hall to Public Works? Because that makes sense.
We're just swapping personnel, right?
The engineer will go into the HR office at Public Works, but HR is
Yeah.
not going to go into the engineering office at City Hall, but in another office.
But
is the HR going to get a better looking office?
Yes.
Ah,
Mine's up for college, actually.
Other questions on engineering at all? Okay. Up next is information technology. That's on page 28. That also is under the general government category. So we go from having a budget that's down 100,000 to one that's up 95,000 for the net increase. And essentially, this is, all falls basically under the labor cost. This is another department where we are recommending another full-time employee, and also a change to creating an IT supervisor in that department. So for those of you that don't know, currently we have an information technology director that's very part-time, but is one that oversees the major projects and assists with that type of thing, and oversees the department generally. Joel currently really has been working as the supervisor, if you will, de facto supervisor. We have currently two IT techs, Joel being one of them, Gareth being the other. This proposal is to add a third IT tech. So we would have two IT tech ones and then an IT supervisor. That IT supervisor would be, again, full-time position here, a little bit of an increase in the pay for that position, utilizing current personnel, and would do the day-to-day oversight of scheduling the IT work. Also, the two full-time employees in that department really do a ton of work. I've noticed that. This is another department that I've overseen as assistant manager since I started. We were doing weekly check-ins. We're doing monthly check-ins now just because I don't have the time to do bi-weekly. But the amount of work that they do is really incredible. From the simple request that, I can't print, to the network's down. They also cover, as you probably all know or remember, several other communities that contract with Waterville to provide services. This past year, one of the goals for the department was to create a standardized cost structure for those contracts, which we've done with Joel's help, and those are being implemented. There's a health insurance increase to go along with this, obviously, because we have to budget for full health insurance for full family plan. So we don't know what that. What's that?
They can't share Joel's.
We don't know what that'll end up looking like. And then the other increase in this, really the notable increase here, is under training and conferences. Again, if we have a new employee, we need to have more training, but we also have to have additional training for the two that we have currently to make sure they're on top of everything in the IT world. Those are my comments. Joel, I don't know if you have any comments you'd like to add?
I don't have anything, excuse me, specifically to add unless you have any questions.
I mean,
Well, what's coming down the pike in terms of new developments in the IT department? Are we the city's website, the connections to city employees, to other departments? Would you let us know what's coming down the pike?
We just wrapped up a fairly significant software upgrade over at City Hall. That was the closure that we had there last week. That finished on Friday, cleaning up some loose ends this morning. That's brand new, completed. That went very well. As far as upcoming, city website is very high on that list. notifications we've talked about. That's kind of one and the same, but that's something we're working on, hoping to get some of that stuff together in the next few weeks.
The network.
Network infrastructure is a big one. Sometime in the next probably 18 months, replacing all the aging infrastructure.
So now is replacing the infrastructure, is that in the budget here?
It's not in the budget. It'll be probably a bond request. It's on the
okay.
capital side. So
On the capital side, okay.
Yes, yep. But that also has to be done in conjunction with other communities that we share networks with.
Correct. Yeah.
So we have to plan that out well in advance. Because there's a significant cost for us, but also for the others. I know, Tom Klepak, you have a question.
Yeah. Hey, Joel, I wanted to, first of all, thank you for how much you do for the city. You are behind the scenes, but really so much of what happens here depends upon your expertise and professionalism. We thank you. Really appreciate it. Can you talk for just a little bit about the types of vulnerabilities in our IT infrastructure that you perceive out there? So, for example, can you talk about how you interact with the dispatching system or any of the other essential services that the city provides?
I'm not really sure how to answer that in this forum. Without spending a fair amount of time.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to do here is set you up to be able to justify the position as well as you can for those who are maybe listening here, just to really get them to see. I guess, for example, my eyes were open to how crucial your role is when I talked to Chief Essler about how his department is so dependent upon you, not moment to moment, but there are times when your support is just absolutely crucial to the functioning of his department. I wanted to hear you talk about that just a bit.
Oh, sure. Okay. Essentially, anything that plugs in, turns on, almost falls under our umbrella. So records management for police, fire, the software package that we just spent the last 2 days working on for City Hall. That's HR, accounts payable, accounts receivable. Any transaction that happens in customer service kind of falls under that. Printing, interfacing with some of the state entities for, credit card payments, those types of things. Connectivity in the police cruisers and fire apparatus, again, for records management. Traffic signals touch our infrastructure.
And the budgetary request that we have in here, in your opinion, is that going to be sufficient to be able to recruit the kind of professional with the sorts of skills that we need to fill the gap?
I think so.
Yeah, we did that. That was the number that came out of our salary survey from last year, Counselor. So that should be where we land. And I think it's important to note that, as Joel said, pretty much everything every employee does touches technology for the city. It's very much like HR. It touches every department every day on what we're doing. We wouldn't be sitting here looking at my computer screen if it wasn't for IT. I'm networked back to the servers, and I'm looking at documents that without that I couldn't. I couldn't operate, on the weekends at home if I didn't have the services that we have and that we provide. It works seamlessly, which is amazing. The other thing I want to say, too, about this third position in the department is that up until recently, a week and a half ago, we didn't have an on-call rotational schedule for the 2 employees that were there. Joel created one with some guidance from myself and the IT director, but it was mostly his work. And to think about the fact that, you know, in the middle of the night or in the middle of a fire call and we have a communications issue, they're the one that's going to get the call to fix it. You need to fix it immediately, right? So they were on call basically 24/7. Didn't matter the time of day, the weekend, even if they're on vacation, they were still getting the calls. So we have implemented an on-call rotational schedule, which is, I think, helpful and will allow each employee that we have currently to be able to be at least off call 1 week at a time. But with that third person included, it just adds more to that position. It's a valuable position because then you have a greater length of time when you're not on call. Now, as an IT supervisor position, obviously there are going to be times when that position will get contacted regardless, just like the IT director does now. So, but for us, in order for us to plan IT well going forward, we really need to have that third person that is doing, that's doing the IT fixes, if you will, on a daily basis, so we can have somebody that's planning that department out and really looking forward to what we need to do.
During our council workshop, one of the main things was support city staff.
Right.
So if we added this third position, do you think that would definitely help the IT department work more efficiently and get things done, and again, not overwhelm and cause stress and things
I
of
certainly
that sort?
think, at least from my perspective, we could become a little more proactive instead of basically 100% reactive, which is how we functioned for the last several years.
Sounds good.
And I see the ticket list. They track all of the requests that come in for IT, right? So I see that, and I have access to that, and they've done well over the last couple of weeks trying to dig out from under that, but there's still 30 to 45 ticket requests for action on that right now. And there's 2 people, and one of those requests could take 3 or 4 hours. One of them could take 5 minutes.
Well, see, the thing is, my concern is, when you have a department that doesn't have the support it needs, it becomes overwhelming and people suffer from burnout.
True.
So if it's something that we can alleviate, and that's something that we need to do then.
Yep. Mike, did you have a question?
Can you run me through this hierarchy? I'm
Sure.
so we have, who's the director?
Currently, we have Josh Grant, who is the part-time IT director.
So when we say director, what does that mean? What is his role?
His role is to oversee the department. However, because he's a part-time stipend employee, he's not on site often. So he's there for the phone call to say, hey, can you help us with this major issue that we're having? Or, what should we be looking at? He's also there to serve as the department head, if you will, that would assist in reviewing the performance of employees, but it's very difficult if he's not here. And then we have currently IT technician 1 and an IT technician 2, different levels of skill and responsibility. Under the new structure, we still will have that IT director. My feeling is probably for a year, and then we'll transition away from that because we'll then have an IT supervisor that's on site here, would be Joel in my estimation. And that person would be the one that's running the day-to-day schedules of the 2 IT techs that would be underneath in the hierarchy, if you will. And then, working on policies and procedures and the like so that we have those things done in conjunction with the other IT techs, but wouldn't have to be the one that's responding necessarily first and foremost to those calls, depending on what it is, obviously. If it's depending on what the call is, that's who responds. Then next year, my thought would be that the IT director stipend probably goes away. We are always going to need professional experience and advice when it comes to, designing a network system. Just to bounce the ideas off another professional, whether that is an IT director or whether that's another professional that we contract with on a very occasional basis, remains to be seen. So currently we have a part-time IT director that's off-site most of the time, and 2 IT technicians. This proposal is the part-time IT director that's still off-site, an IT supervisor, and 2 technicians. So we'd have 3 full-time instead of the 2 full-time that we have now.
All right, again, maybe this is just the language that we use. We have a person somewhere, part-time, that we call the director,
Correct,
who is the department head,
correct.
yet Joel is here tonight
Yes.
to talk about the budget and where this
Yep.
department goes,
Yep.
but this person who we pay, and I don't know what the difference is, but we, we pay this title, and I don't know that I've ever seen this person, and maybe that's a good thing.
Used to be a full-time employee of the city.
So this person that we're paying, this director, he has another job somewhere else,
Yes.
and he's kind of like on call for us,
Yes.
or as to help run these little scenarios.
Yeah, and Joel, I mean, you can give some examples of, the types of advice or calls that you give to Josh.
Yeah, so I would say I treat him like a high-level consultant, essentially. Except it's somebody on payroll, that's not, that we're not paying several $100s an hour for. Perfect example, last Monday, he came up and we did a large networking project that required several hours of downtime. We were able to do that on the holiday closure. So stuff like that.
Okay.
And
8 or 9 hours that we spent that day.
And the design of the new network, I mean, that's something that will be in his wheelhouse as well, in consultation with Joel, obviously. But part of this too, Mike, I didn't ask Josh to be here tonight because, to be honest with you, we're training Joel
Yeah.
to be that supervisor. So
No, and that's fine. That's why I'm just literally scratching my head just as we go through these titles and whatnot, and to me, Joel's doing the work of the director. Yet, even when this whole thing is done, we're going to get rid of the director, and it's just going to be a supervisor. So it's just.
well, it may be different next year if I depending on how things progress during the year. It may be that now we have an IT director on site, and the supervisor goes away. So it all depends on how things progress.
Yeah. All right. I trust you.
What else does this director do? Like, I always look at you like you're the one running. I always assumed it was your department. Yep. Because you're the one that's always running around doing
That
stuff.
was kind of my point.
You know
like,
what
I
I mean?
don't think I've ever met
What
Josh,
does this
but-
director position actually do for you?
Again, I would say it's that high-level consulting, and I don't want it to be lost that there's 20 years of institutional knowledge that director has as well. So the network and the infrastructure as it exists today is largely built by him. So even today, it's, hey, do you remember 12 years ago when this happened, why it was done that way? Those types of things.
Does he get involved in the day-to-day operation of IT department? Does he come in and troubleshoot and help you guys troubleshoot problems and things of that
Not
sort?
unless I
Or does he
ask
just
him.
hang out at home and you guys call him?
I call him if I need help, or say, hey, we're working on this project. Do you have any, guidance, or can you provide some insight as to?
I think
Or as Joel said, on the holiday, he'll come in and work on a major project with the IT staff that we have for a major upgrade on whatever it might be,
and
infrastructure or, whatever it is.
and he's getting a yearly salary
It's
for
15,
fielding
it's,
phone calls?
it's 15,000 a year for him
Yeah,
to
but that is
service that.
a bargain.
No,
That
no.
is a-
Yeah.
Because if we were to hire a consultant or pay a consultant to do that, you're talking a couple $100 an hour
Right.
to provide that same service.
But you don't have documentation of all the stuff that, I can tell you everything I've done for, say, Tacanet Federal Credit Union when they were open. I've got the documentation for every single thing that was done that is archived, that is able to be seen. You don't have that today?
Well, there's certainly documentation that exists, but again, the people that were directly involved in that project, a phone call away.
So, essentially, but aren't we that for other towns and we charge less than what we're paying this director?
No, we wouldn't, we're not paying less. We're not being paid less than what the director is. It's $15,000 a year,
Yeah, but we only charge some towns 10 grand a year.
but they're not getting as much service. It's not like he has a limited number of phone calls or work that he does for us. It's basically whatever we ask him to do, he does.
Well, can we ask him to come to the next budget meeting when it's his turn for his department?
Sure.
I mean,
That was my decision to make.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, and up front, you know?
I just always assumed that was Joel's role. Like, that would be what he would be doing. Like,
Well, and that's part,
he seems capable.
this is part of,
As Bill said, that is the intention here. I mean,
Yeah.
their plan, they're grooming Joel for that role, but that takes time.
it does. And we started, I've started working with Joel really over the last 6 months or so. Bobby Joe has done that as well, from an HR perspective. But it does take time to make that happen. But, I can't say in 6 months, maybe we're at that point. Maybe by the end of December we're there. Maybe it takes until March. Maybe it takes until June. It's part of the evolution of
And all
some of the
all we're
departments.
doing tonight is talking about hiring a extra full-time person to make the department run better. The longer-term discussion about how the IT department's going to be evolve in the future is one of those things that I'm sure the city manager is going to share with council as it happens.
I mean, the only reason I
Well,
say
that's
that is
fine.
I've been around this town for the last 6 or 7 years. Joel's been here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I've never seen the other person. And I come from that's what I do. I mean, we can talk shop all day long.
Yep.
It baffles me that we still have somebody hanging out there that isn't like,
Yeah, but you remember what you've been doing for 20 years.
yeah,
Yeah, so you've got institutional memory of your own.
I do, but it's all documented in digital, so the next guy knows how to do it too.
Yeah, well, we've identified that as, a thing that the city needs to work on. We mentioned it already in terms of HR tonight.
Yep, we're good with that. I just want to clarify. I just want to make sure. Like, I'm not going to be here for next year's budget. I'd like to not see. I'd hopefully not see that position in. Joel already be in it by next budget season.
Well, that, again, that's the plan.
Okay.
But, I've identified a lot of different areas that need improvement,
I get that.
and this is certainly one of those.
Good luck, Joel.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you.
You said this was going to be 5 minutes.
Didn't you tell us this was a short meeting?
No, he said engineering was gonna be 5
Right.
No, that was Joel to Bill. He said I've only got to sit here for 5 minutes.
Up next is health and welfare.
Fire department.
That's on page 22. That's under the general government section as well. So this budget shows a slight decrease of $9,500. There was some changes in the finance committee to this budget as well, which falls under the city manager proposed column. But I'll hit the highlights here and then I'll review those with you.
Are we looking at the new sheet that you laid out for us?
Yes, the new sheet, please. Yep. Really, the only differences here are under line 16, which is the welfare reimbursement from the state. I think, Mike, you already had the new sheet. I think you put it in your book already.
Okay.
I gave it to everybody else last time at the beginning of the meeting. Yep,
When was last time?
last
Last one, Thursday.
Thursday. Yeah,
I wasn't here.
or maybe it was the previous one. There should have been one sitting at your desk.
Oh, I was late.
I haven't been here in a week.
I was late at the last one, that's why.
Okay. Well, I certainly will get it to you. But I'll tell you what the difference was from the one you may have in your book versus the one that was handed out. Line 16, the state welfare reimbursement. So there was a reduction down in, under the costs recommended by the Finance Committee in housing assistance based on what we're actually using. And what I failed to do when I made that change was reduce the welfare reimbursement as well. Because if the state reimburses us 70% of the assistance that we hand out to the clients, and so if we make a reduction in the expense, I have to make a reduction in the revenue that's coming in as well. So that's the difference in that line from the original budget book to the ones that I handed out sometime last week. So you do see in that line a reduction of $68,000 in the state welfare reimbursement line. And then down under line 4647 under general assistance in those categories, there's a reduction in emergency housing, which is $75,000, and housing of all types, which is $25,000. And again, this is based on what we actually are using, keeping in mind that general assistance has a specific set of guidelines that we have to follow, the caseworkers that we employ have to follow. And the Finance Committee felt that I had originally requested $100,000 for temporary housing, emergency housing, and $50,000 for housing in general. And it was felt based on what we have for expenses through 6 months that we could reduce that further. I also should note that general assistance is one of those categories that we are allowed to overspend by state statute because it's a required program that we need to administer essentially on behalf of the state, even though we pick up a majority of the cost.
We get what, 70% reimbursement?
We get 70% back. There are bills in the legislature right now that would up that to 90%, which would be fantastic, but we'll see what that chance is. But this is only budgeted at 70%. Questions on health and welfare?
And there's no request for additional hiring in health and welfare?
There is not. We have 2 full-time and 1 part-time in health and welfare, and they're handling the caseload that they have currently. Okay. Capital expenses are next. Those are under the capital tab, I believe, in your books. And this is a little bit different than what you've seen in the years past. So what I've done here, I'll try to explain this sheet for you. So under the FY24, there are 3 columns: total, expense, and bond. So the total column shows the total expense for whatever project that might be that's being recommended. The bond column is recommended items to be bonded. As we've talked about before, we anticipate that we'll have a bond. We'll issue a bond next year, early next year. And so you'll see that column with items that are recommended to go to bond. Under the administration area, there are a couple of projects that I'm recommending, which is painting of City Hall, and I'm calling it Phase 1. Essentially, Phase 1 is the common street facing side of City Hall, which has the most trim that needs to be taken care of, includes the columns and the decorative on top of the roof line, as well as all around the windows, that type of thing. It's not simply just painting it. Obviously, it's removing what's there, cleaning it, filling in holes, things like that. And then there's brickwork for the steps, as well as repointing the building, so that's $20,000. The brickwork is mainly around the front steps, again, facing the common side. We have some mortar that's failing, it's been repaired. You can tell various times over the years. Really needs a lot of work to reset that, to make that solid. And then repointing various points of the building itself to make sure that we're not falling behind in repairs. Phase 2 of the painting is recommended in the next fiscal year. So you'll see the grayed out columns are fiscal years 25 through 28, where we have some projects that we're trying to start that plan. As I've said to the council before, we started working on a capital improvement plan this past fall, and we were making some good progress, and then the manager resigned, and we haven't. Capital improvement plan moving forward. Under fire and rescue.
Excuse me,
Sure.
I want to make sure I understand the columns.
Yep.
You've got total expenses and bond, and so if something appears that you're asking for in next year's bond, in the column that says bond,
Yep.
and if it doesn't, it's just an expense we're working on out of our current capital account.
Yes, out of FY24. Yep.
So that'll be money that'll be out of the expense column is going to be an expense line somewhere in the total expense,
Yes,
non-operating expenses.
correct.
Okay.
Yep, you'll see it. You'll see it next.
Okay.
Under fire and rescue, we have 3 projects that we're recommending. A fire chief vehicle. He hasn't had a vehicle for a couple of years, so that's $50,000. I explained this when we were talking about the fire department budget. It was originally in his budget, but it's really a capital expense because it lasts longer than 3 years. The public safety substation design. This is an item that's been carried forward from last year as well that was cut. And then the utility truck replacement, which also was an item that was cut from last year at $100,000.
Would you explain what the public safety substation is?
Yes, that's a recommendation from the police chief, fire chief, and airport manager about having a consultant engineering firm come in and look at what we would need to do to design and locate a second public safety station so that we would have coverage on the southern end of town. We're thinking, potentially around the airport, on the airport road for a location, but that could change based on, whatever consultant might come in and say it makes more sense to do it here or there. Ideally,
Didn't we just build a new police station?
yes. This would be primarily fire and EMS to locate equipment there so they have a quicker response, but certainly would be, could be used by the police as well. And others. I mean, again, we need a consultant to come in and really look at what we have for facilities and what we provide for services and give us their report and what it would look like or what it should look like, what it would be recommended for.
But it's not something that's absolutely imminent, so that's one of those things we could put off until next year.
We certainly could. We could also put it into the bond. If any of these things could be put into the bond for that matter. It's one of those things where if we have and we've talked about this a little bit before, with congressional delegated spending earmarks, if we have something that's close to shovel ready, we can submit for funding for that type of project as well. So I think it's important to have this done, but it is something that we could put into the bond. Any of these we could put into the bond as well. Under Public Works, we have the annual paving program. You see $81,755 in there. That's because that's a TIF money that's funding that in the TIF designated areas where we're allowed to do paving. That's why it's an odd number.
That's out of the natural gas pipeline
Yes.
TIF? Yes.
Yes, I'm glad I was just trying to look it up, so I'm glad you remembered that. And then
Now and then the old memory does work.
Last but not least, under police, we have a couple of small projects, upgrading to a laser shot firearm conversion kits and remote access surveillance camera. To have a second one, we have one remote surveillance camera currently that works wonders wherever we have it deployed. A second one would be vital for operations for the police department. And then the laser shot firearm conversion kits would allow them to do their proper training within the training room that they are unable to do at this point. These two things, they're small amounts, but because they're over our current $5,000 capital limit and 3-year lifespan, that's why they fall in here. But I mean, really, they're more operating numbers. But again, we'll be upgrading that capital policy when we work on it later on this summer and fall. So you wouldn't normally see a $6,500 number in there. You would find it under the operating budget in future years. And again, this is a snapshot. I've taken the department heads really did a fantastic job in submitting capital requests. You don't see all of the work that's gone into these. You will see that when we get this capital plan done, which will be incredibly more robust. And it's needed to be done for a long, long time. So, any questions on these items? Any more questions? Okay. Non-operating costs is on page 30. Now known as non-operating expense. So this is where the debt service, outside agencies, county tax, and the TIF revenue deduction shows up. Under debt service, line 11 is the first full year of the bond payment that was borrowed last year. And then directly underneath that, line 12 is the estimated cost for selling a bond during this next fiscal year. That's the $42,500. Under outside agencies.
And we're going to discuss the possible bond for this fiscal year, but we're going to do it in the fall to
Yes.
probably issue the bond in the spring.
Yes. Yep. So the council will weigh in on all the different items, and hopefully at that point we'll have that capital improvement program, so you can see all of those projects that we're looking at over the next 5 years.
And will the revisioning process be done by that time?
Yes, I expect that it will be.
Yes. I'm not going to ask about the comprehensive plan because we're running behind on that.
Yes. Yep. Under the outside agencies, this is KV Cap is the same amount. Alphon Youth Center is the same amount. Waterville Creates has requested $35,000, which is $25,000 more than the current year. And then the Finance Committee had a discussion around miscellaneous community services. If you remember, around miscellaneous community services, this fiscal year, the money was removed as part of the budget cuts. There was a request put in for $50,000 that would be distributed. The recommendations for it would be created by the ARPA committee as it was done the year before that. And when I say the year before that, I mean the fiscal year before that. There was $50,000 before that was distributed by the council upon recommendation by the ARPA committee. So the Finance Committee felt that we should add $50,000 in for miscellaneous community services again this year. I want to note that you'll see in the non-operating revenues that the recommendation was that we would use ARPA funds for that money, so it doesn't come out of the tax dollars. And then again, under Waterville Creates, I did put at your stations the written request and justification from Waterville Creates for your information. just looking at my notes. One other note around the Waterville Creates contribution, if you will, it is funded by TIF revenue as well. Questions from anybody on?
Eric Thomas is here from Waterville Creates.
Yep.
Can we allow him to speak to this?
It's up to Jay.
Eric Thomas, Ward 7, also Assistant Executive Director at the Waterville Opera House. So I can speak much more intelligently about anything at the Opera House, and then can try to answer questions as much as possible about the larger Waterville Creates funding. I would just point out that this is actually a request for 2 years of funding. So the 35 would be for this year and for next fiscal year. What we've run into the last few years, certainly specifically with Waterville Rocks, is that the council, of course, does not vote until July or late June on the budget, and our events start in July. And where you're a major sponsor of the event, it holds up our marketing materials, our announcements, many of the things that go along with the event. It also, you know, it's easier for us to plan, obviously, further in advance if we know that we have funding secured. So the 10,000 would be to support this year's Waterville Rocks, and then there would be 10,000 for next year's Waterville Rocks, and 15,000 to support the larger programs of Waterville Creates. And then I think there's also a snapshot of what we would be looking for potentially a year after that. Obviously, I have a lot of history with the council and the budget and these events. And over the years, I've been sort of in a difficult position because I've always wanted to advocate for this sort of funding for Waterville Rocks and for the Waterville Opera House and Waterville Creates. But obviously, when I've been on the council, it's a pretty direct conflict of interest. So it's been hard for me to get up and advocate for these things. But certainly, you know, with all of the money that the city has invested in public spaces, specifically Head of Falls, you know, what has been missing until recently is what comes next. Like, great, we have this space, but if we're not using it for anything, then what was all that investment for? And so, you know, we're one of the few organizations that's actually trying to activate this space and get people down there, you know, numbering in the thousands, you know. Certainly I would advocate for it. You know, I helped spearhead the city center TIF while I was on the council the last time, which is generating lots of money, and a big portion of that money is coming from a building that is occupied by largely by Waterville Creates. And part of my thinking in instigating that conversation was to free up TIF dollars to support things like Waterville Rocks. It's written specifically into the downtown TIF that those funds can be used for things like festivals and events. And over the years, it really, to varying degrees, it has, but not in the way that I think it should. You know, these are 4 free, family-friendly events. Certainly, we're drawing people from out of town, but it's definitely a benefit to the people of Waterville. I saw many of the councilors and the mayor down there last year. So, and with that, I would love to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, I just want to make a clarification too. So the fiscal years for Waterville Creates are different than the city's fiscal years. So that's why we've got this issue. So if you look at the that table of schedule that they have for the payments, you know, this 35,000 would be going for basically for the next 18 months for Waterville Creates, which, you know, I mean, technically we could probably reduce this by $10,000 in the FY24 budget for the city, but then it hampers their programming ability for what they want to do. So that's why that whole 35 is in there. But it's certainly up to the council, you know, and as Eric has said, actually specifically, Waterville Creates is an organization that's listed in that TIF specifically, so.
Any questions?
I'll ask one. Hey, Eric, thank you for coming tonight and talking to us about this. Can you talk a little bit about the caliber of artist and the caliber of programming and how that may translate into attendance at these events a little bit, given the amount that you've requested here?
Well, certainly the entertainment business is largely driven by money. The more money you have to spend, the more well-known artists you can book, which of course will bring more people out to these events. And we can fit 5,000 or 6,000 people at Head of Falls, and so if we were to, if the more funding we had, the more high-profile artists we could book, which would fill the space up more. I mean, just imagine if we had 4 events a year where there were 4,000 people down at Head of Falls, and the sort of impact that would have. And it's not just the impact of the events; it's the publicity it generates around the state. You never know who's going to show up to these events. You could have potential developers, people who are looking to relocate. And it certainly paints our community in a bright light for those people. So I think while there's the direct impact of the event itself, there's also the marketing impact for the city as a whole that these events bring.
How many people have you been able to attract historically? I was there. It seemed crowded last year, but can you just talk about the number?
It varies. I think probably in the beginning of Waterville Rocks, we were talking 400 or 500 people per event. So, about 2,000 people. If I had to, it's always hard to estimate a random crowd of people. If I had to guess, last year we probably had more in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 5,000 people total at the 4 events. We made some changes to the event last year, which I think made it more appealing to people. We have tied it in with the opening night of the film festival, one of the first shows, to sort of make a bigger event, which was always the goal of Waterville Creates to begin with. And then beyond Waterville Rocks, of course, again, there's funding in there to support Waterville Creates' larger activities, which includes the film festival, all of the things that we do at the Waterville Opera House. Just this month alone, we're going to have 6,000 people come through the doors at the Waterville Opera House. And while many of those are paid admissions. Another thing I think that we're all particularly proud of that we just started recently was the Youth Arts Access Fund, which I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but essentially if you're somebody under the age of 18 and there's something you want to go to at the Opera House and you can't afford it, we will pay for your tickets for you. And so, we're raising money for that and, paying for youth in our community to enjoy arts of all types, whether it's a concert, a play, a dance performance, whatever it is. And that reaches not just Waterville, but beyond Waterville as well.
Is it the minor, or are you paying for their family as well? Like, you paying for the whole kit and caboodle, or just the...
We will pay for the children.
Okay.
And a couple questions. One of them, I'm glad you brought up Youth Arts Access Fund. I'm so excited about that. I advocate that to anyone I possibly can. Can you tell me what the usage of that fund has been this past year?
Well, I can tell you just our most recent theatrical production, The Play That Goes Wrong, which we sold 2,600 tickets for. It was a new record for the Opera House for a straight play. That event alone, we had 140 youth in our community and our surrounding communities that we paid for tickets for to go to that event.
140? That's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
To go back to the question of the Waterville Rocks, what is your target with the funding that you've requested? What's your
Oop, you muted yourself there, Tom.
What's your attendance target with this level of funding?
Well, so for this year, the talent is already booked, and the funding level we're looking for this year is similar. For the next 2 years, is similar to where it has been from the city for the last 2 years. That said, I expect with the acts that we have booked that we'll see, again, at least 1,000 to 1,500 people at each of our events. And then, if moving forward, when we get to FY, I think 24, 25, and we were looking for 20,000 for Waterville Rocks, certainly I would expect, we could book a caliber of talent that would bring, 2,500 people or more out. And it also makes it easier for us when we approach other sponsors for them to see that the city is committed to these events. And right now, certainly we see the benefit. It's one of my favorite events of the year, but we are subsidizing this event both with our staff time and with funds from our other programs. Even now, these cost about, if you factor in staff time, I would say about $12,500 per event. So we're spending, about $50,000 a year to put on these events, and right now we're recouping about 30,000 of that. Thank you.
Well, I am excited about this program as well. I agree. I echo the comments that you had made earlier, which basically, we have all this improvement in the downtown, but it's meaningless until we can fill it with programming, until we can have events that draw people in and help transform that space from a renovated space into what I hope to see be the front yard of the city of Waterville. It's I view it as our living room, and it's these kinds of events that I think are essential to bringing life into this space that we've created down there.
I couldn't agree more. And, I know there's been a push over the years to develop that space, but I really see more value in it as green space, especially in the short term. We have plenty of other places where we can build buildings, plenty of vacant spaces that we can fill up. If you look at an overhead map of the downtown, this is one of the few large green spaces, and it's certainly one of the few places in the city where the public can go and enjoy the river. I've said this before, but you could easily drive through Waterville and be like, why do they call this place Waterville? And that's one of the few places where you really understand where the name came from.
Any other questions on the non-operating expenses? Okay, so non-operating revenues are on the next page. I'm going to start off by saying that property tax is factored in here. The way that it's factored currently, because we don't know what the tax rate is going to be because of the revaluation and obviously the budget having to be adopted. So what I've done is used our current tax rate with what was with the new value that had been calculated to be added as if it was a normal year and not a revaluation year. So you see an increase in property taxes there, and again, that's just from what we see as potential new value and at the current tax rate. So it's more important, I think, to focus this one under starting with penalties and interest and going down. So highlights here are under intergovernmental revenues, line 31 and 32. That's state revenue sharing. We're seeing an increase of almost $250,000. That's a projection from the state treasurer's office. And then under homestead reimbursement, we're seeing an increase there. And this is just based on the number of homesteads that were calculated by the assessor's office on March 13th. So that number will fluctuate based on what those are. There are also 12 or 13 bills in the legislature currently that could potentially affect homestead reimbursements. So that number always changes, and it's never really set until the end. Under use of other funds, these are other areas that I think are really important to point out. Line 48, that's the use of unassigned fund balance. So I'm recommending using $185,000 less in this current version of the budget. I'm still evaluating that, to be honest with you. I need to look at the numbers and see what we can do there. As I said in the overview of the budget, this current year we're using ARPA funds at $308,000, almost $309,000. The $50,000 that's in there that's recommended is for the miscellaneous community services, as we just talked about. And then use of unassigned capital fund, line 51 last year, if you'll recall, we used $250,000 of that fund that wasn't designated for any purpose to help offset what was need to be raised from taxes. So I'm not anticipating, we don't have that fund anymore. We've used that. So we don't have that as revenue. So you see a decline in those revenues.
So last year, we used $2 million out of the reserve fund.
$2,085,000, yep.
The year before that, we used $750,000.
Yep.
And you're asking us to take another almost $2 million out of it this year.
Correct.
Isn't that going to start leaving us perilously short of our reserve fund?
It isn't. That 1.9 million that I'm recommending would still leave us at 12% or more, based on the audited numbers that you'll see when you get the audit presentation in front of the council.
I'm assuming then that the $2 million that we took out last year, we didn't need all of it?
We did not. And that, you know, I'm working on, actually, the finance director has prepared some information for me that I'll share with the council when I've had a chance to review it, and that shows the history of the use of fund balance over the last 8 years or so. So you can see the patterns and what's been used, what's been budgeted to be used, and then what was actually used, because there is a difference in that, obviously. So that'll be additional information that you'll probably have perhaps by the end of this week.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yep, so that you'll see that. I just haven't had a chance to review it. And I will say that, you know, these numbers are, the unassigned fund balance use, you know, may change. What I plan on doing over the next week or so is really rolling up my sleeves and getting into the budget even more than I have, and coming forward with some recommendations for potential reductions in expenses. Going to work with departments on that because I realize that the amount of money that we're looking at to raise from taxes is a significant amount of money. But I also realize that we have some significant needs that haven't been funded previously that I feel strongly should be. So I will be providing those recommendations to the council before you take your first budget vote.
Well, in that regard, and one of the reasons that I'm concerned about the reserve fund balance is we are going to be looking at the revisioning report, and I'm guessing that the revisioning report is going to ask us to spend a lot of money. So if we don't deplete our reserve fund, why, we'll have some place to start thinking about how we're going to make Waterville look as nice as the two-way traffic on downtown is.
Yeah, the council will have some difficult choices when it comes to that. Do you have any other questions around this? You know, I will say that the TIF revenue, I haven't touched base on this at all because it's all estimates. It's all based on what the value is in all of those TIF districts and what the mill rate is. We're currently using the current mill rate because we don't know what the mill rate will be. Those numbers will change. I will say that last year, or the current year that we're in, we were using basically all of the revenue from the TIFs as well as some fund balance from TIFs. And I'm not proposing that we do that for this year. I'm proposing that we actually keep some money in the TIF reserve accounts, so that one of the things, if we're looking at the downtown visioning, this next phase, then there's funding in there that could be utilized. And there's some other projects that I think that we could do over the next year or two that would utilize TIF funds better than how they've been being utilized in the past. So, but that'll be a different discussion with the council at some point in the future. That's basically the budget, other than the school department. So next May 2nd, next Tuesday, before your regular meeting, you have a 6 o'clock meeting with the school department, so they'll discuss their budget requests. You do have that information in your budgets. So, and then after that, we did have May 16th as the first budget vote. I believe that we'll be moving that meeting to May 23rd, and that we'll move the first budget vote to the first meeting in June, which I believe is June 6th. I will not be here for the second meeting in May because I will be away on vacation. Patty will be here, and I expect that the finance director will be here as well. And we'll try to keep your agenda, to the what's needed to be done on May 23rd.
Well, just a heads up on the schools. We met with the school, the school city finance committee met, and we discussed what the school is asking for this year. But one of the things that we did talk about is the high school needs in the neighborhood of $30 million of improvements so that the high school does not lose accreditation. So if you want your kid to graduate and be able to go to college, we need to start thinking about how we're going to keep the high school in good shape. So that's way down the road, but it's something that I do think we need to keep in mind because I think one of the most important things about the city is our school system.
And before you guys decide to spend $30 million to renovate a building, you should figure out how to combine schools and create a regional high school. Because the fact that we have all these schools within these two towns is sort of ridiculous. And you know what else isn't in the school budget? An SRO. There's no school resource officer in that budget whatsoever. They didn't ask for one. We haven't given them one. And it seems kind of odd with all the issues that we've been having in that school district that we don't have a school resource officer.
But that's for next week to talk about.
Yep. Oh, I'll be ready. I'm just planting the seed now. Let's see if it grows.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.